And with us today and the blockchain advisor is my oldest friend from the trading floor, Mark Cavanagh. I met Mark Cavanagh when I started in 1981 as a runner for a floor trader who sent me into the Federal Express pit with orders in FedEx, and I forget what the other stocks were, but really, I shared an office with Mark. We definitely went through the fire and flames, the crash of '87, everything
Crash of
simultaneously.
'89.
Mini crash of '89, the whole thing. And so there is probably no. I have not been anticipating a conversation or interview with greater
Ah,
excitement than Mark, because we hung out in the same office. He played backgammon, I played Tetris and Doom.
yeah.
Anyhow, just some
We
great
listened to
stories.
Steve Vai. We listened to all the rock and roll guitar players.
Right, right, absolutely. Joe,
Satriani.
Joe Satriani. We had epic seats.
Epic.
We bribed the security guards to let us up on the top deck, but
Yeah. We weren't going to get in either.
well, we had somebody with us with a large bankroll of $100 bills that helped.
No, it was like we got to the Aragon Ballroom. It was 1989. We said, we got to go see Satriani. The guy's like, he's crazy good, crazy good. Okay, we'll go. And we get there and it's wall to wall headbangers. And we're like, what? Yeah, the only place we could stay is the press box. Let's go up there. So we wander up to the press box, and some headbanger guy goes, "Dude, forget it. He'll never let you in." I go, "You didn't try enough money, did you?" He goes, I tried to give him $20, and I'm like, 20? Hey, would you take 50? And the guy's like, "Beat it." And we're like, "Would you take 100?" He's like, "Okay."
Come
And
on in.
he let us all in. So we're sitting there with Satriani's people in the press box at the Aragon. Oh, it was the best.
It was the best. It was just watching him play from up above was like being in heaven looking down at
Right.
a master.
And then he points to his friend, and we're like, he's pointing to us. Oh my God.
He saw me. All right, so
Yeah.
we're getting way ahead of ourselves because
Oh
let's
yeah.
go back to 1981, and for you, a few years before that. So,
Yeah.
Mark, tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up? What school did you go to? What were your hobbies? What brought you to the CBOE? Let's just.
Okay. I grew up in River Forest, went to St. Luke's School, uh, kindergarten through eighth grade. And then it was time to, pick a high school. And my dad and my uncles and my brother all went to Fenwick right over here in Oak Park.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I don't know. Most all my friends were going to go to Oak Park High School. And I'm like, I don't know. And then one of my friends, Peter Darley, said, "Come on, we're going to go down to St. Ignatius and go to their open house." And I'm like, okay. So we went down there, and he and I were the only two kids from our class that ended up going to Ignatius. And from there, it was like, okay, what do I want to do from here? I want to be challenged, but I've been playing music my whole life, and I've been advised not to go into music because it was precarious, to say the least.
Mhm.
So I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. And so I put an application to a bunch of schools, and Illinois State was right there, and it was close and it was cheap. And I'm like, I'm just going to go there. So I went there for a few semesters, and then it was the summer of '76. A friend of mine says, "Yeah, there's jobs at the Board of Trade." So I went down there, and it was Payne, Weber, Jackson, and Curtis. Yeah. And I got a runner's job in the summer of '76. And someone said to me, "Hey, that you get longer hours but better pay if you go up to the options exchange, this new thing." And I'm like, "What?" I mean, I've never even heard of them. Had no clue. I'm like, "But if it's better, a couple more
Money?
hours, I don't leave at 1:15 or 1:30. I got to stay till 3:15. Okay, but I get better money." So I went wandering around the trading floor. Someone signed me on, and I'm like, I saw this guy, Billy O'Hara, who was the floor manager for Lehman Brothers at the time.
Who
And I'm
now
like,
owns the Schwartz's cigar
yeah,
shop
yeah,
on the
right,
first
right.
floor? Hmm.
So like Billy lived across the street from my cousin, so I sort of knew who he was, and he sort of knew who I was. I'm like, he goes, "Hey, do you need a job?" I'm like, "Yeah." So he hired me as a runner for Lehman Brothers, and then right across the aisle was Jimmy Core and Gino
Oh my
Alexander
gosh.
and
Uh-huh.
Dino, and all those guys were right there. Mike Lamort, all these people. So that was that booth. As you walked down to the trading floor, you took a left. It was that booth right there.
Is this the one that was on
So
seven and a half at that time, or right the one that
yeah,
was on
yeah,
seven
seven
and a
and a
half?
half, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But it was like, okay, now now I'm a runner on the CBOE. I'm like, oh my God, this is way different than the Board of Trade, right? And then I went back to school, but someone had offered me a job that summer. John Martorello and Jimmy Stathis said, you can be our clerk if you come back. So I went back for another semester, knowing full well I was just going to punt and go and be their clerk. So I started as their clerk in January 77 or February 77, whenever it was. So yeah, it was wild. And then from there, I worked for those guys for a good long time. And then Marty Ross, who was a market maker in that pit, it was the Houston Oil Texas Instruments pit. And Marty offered me a job. So I was Marty Ross's clerk. And then he was buddies with Donnie Finkelman and Corky Pearlstein.
Sure.
And those guys sort of mentored me a little bit because I was curious. I wasn't just like Philem and Billem, working for the brokers. I wanted to understand the whole thing. And I didn't have a background. So I figured the best way to do it is to develop a mentorship and those guys really helped me. I mean, I'm friends with Corky today. I mean, I see Corky all the time. He's a great guy. Yeah, I love the guy. And, so those guys mentored me at that point. And I'm like, well, this is what I want to do then. I don't want to be a broker. I want to be a market maker. I want to, or a market taker or whatever it is that we were when he went and stood in the crowd and tried to
be one of those
trade
guys
for eighths and teenies, right?
But Mike Lamore, he worked for E.F. Hutton, though, didn't he? Was he?
Yeah, right. It was the Lehman Brothers booth here, and it was the Hutton booth here, and all those, so I got to know all those guys. And, Gino Alexander, his father was a famous jazz drummer, and he was a drummer. So, we started a conversation there. So, we started playing music together back in the 80s. And,
oh, my gosh.
Yeah, so he was a great guy. I love that guy.
And so then how did you get, meeting you were taking orders, you were working for Jono or something? One of the Greek?
Yeah, Jono and Greek. Yeah, those two. Yeah. So they were order fillers in the Houston Oil Texas Instruments crowd. And then Greek got a deck in the home stake crowd when gold went crazy, right? And then so I would flip back and forth wherever they need me, from the home stake crowd over to the Houston crowd, because Houston was a perennial takeover. And Texas always had good trade. So, and then they finally put me on a seat and I worked with them as like how old was I? 22, probably 21 or 22. Wow. As soon as you could get on a seat, you went on a seat, and they trusted me. And I learned how to leg spreads, and like no one was legging spreads then, but I'm like, hey, I can do this. I can lean on stuff. I
can lean on these orders.
Right. And I would piss off Donnie Finkelman like crazy. What are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm just tightening this up. And he goes, no. So then they started working with me doing conversions and reversals. I said, I can do this combo with you. They go, go leg your stock. And I would leg the stock and they'd take me out of the combo. So I was like, clerks from other market makers would come to me because they know I would leg spreads for them. And like other brokers would never leg spreads because they'd always get caught and have to run it through their error accounts. And they were like, whatever you do, we'll just take it. Right. So that's sort of how I learned how to trade, is by being able to leg spreads for like Stafford's clerk, Tanaka. I forget her first name. Yeah. She used to give me spreads all the time. And Donnie Finkelman's clerk, Pam Brennan, she would give me, spreads to leg all the time.
Every now and then. She lives here in the
so I had mentors. They didn't really maybe know that they were mentoring me, but I was trying to absorb as much as I could.
So then when did you dissolve your relationship with the Greek and then go as an independent?
Well, I was working for Marty. And then I said, what happened? I forget what happened. But I ended up being in the Federal Express crowd because I started working for Howie Omelinsky because he had the deck in the Federal Express crowd. And it turns out Kessler was the main market maker in the Federal Express crowd.
Kessler,
So Howie was not there a lot. And I would just take his deck and I would be legging spreads and stuff. And Kessler was like, what are you doing? What kind of idiot are you? Right. But he liked me because I realized at a very early stage, well, Kessler's the main dog in this crowd. So he's always first. I don't care. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it was Jonathan Shear, heart attack, EKG. Remember that guy?
I do remember him vaguely,
Okay,
but I
so,
remember him.
right, so
EKG, sure.
EKG was in that crowd, and he was first a lot, but he was never first. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
I'd be like, okay, I got this spread, this and this and this, and yeah, I'm like, yeah, okay, Kessler's first, he gets half.
He gets 50, 10, 10,
Right,
10, 10.
right. And she was like, "What? I was first." I was like, "Sorry, I didn't hear you. I, I thought Irv was first." You
Right,
know.
right.
So Kessler loved me because I would always do that, no matter what, right? So then, when it was time to do on my own thing, I did my own thing, and seat leases were like 2,200 a month, and I was like, I can do that. I think my father staked me with with my first account money that you had to put in, right? 30 grand or whatever it was. And that was gone after 6 months because seat leases went from 2,200 to like 6 grand. And I'm like, what's going on? Oh my God. So then I started a partnership with Kessler, and I went to him and I said, I'm broke. He goes, well, this is like the fifth exact story I've heard of the same thing. What makes you any different? And I'm like, I don't know anybody, any money. And he goes, bingo. That's good. That's really good. So
And what year was that?
84.
Okay.
84. So I went into partnership with him, 50%. He goes, I'll put up the dough, go trade boxes, trade butterflies. I was trading the OEX because the OEX opened in 83, I believe, right?
April of 83, I think it was.
Yeah. So he backed me, and I had a partnership from 84 to 86, and we made money. And then he goes, you're free to do whatever you want. I had some cash, and then I traded my own account from 86 probably until 95.
Right.
Yeah.
And crazy years they were.
Oh yeah, they were.
So how would you describe the type of trader were you? Were you mostly time spreads, boxes, butterflies, just scalping?
Yeah.
Pick one or two strikes?
Yeah, never short premium ever, because here's the story. When we started working for Kessler, started working with Kessler, we went to some dinner or something, and it was 80, yeah, it was 84. And the Bears were going to the playoffs, and we had this big discussion about Bears Super Bowl futures. I'm like, it's the Bears. They're not going to the Super Bowl. And they go, yeah, but what would Bears Super Bowl tickets be? And I'm like, they're worthless. And they go, well, we'll pay $10 for them. I'm like, fine, I'll sell you 10, right? And I'm like, well, now I have to consider exactly what that means. If the Bears get to the Super Bowl, I have to come up with 10 tickets to the Super Bowl, and I'm only going to make $100 out of this deal. How stupid is that?
Right.
So, I'd sold them to Kessler. So, I mean, I gotta be good.
You're wearing them. Yeah.
I'm wearing them. So I go to this party with all my friends. I'm in a fantasy pool with these guys, from way, way back. We started early, and I'm the only guy rooting for the Washington Redskins.
They're ready to hang you by your toenails.
Right. And the Bears crush them. And now I'm like, oh no, if they win the next game, they're going to the Super Bowl. And they played San Francisco that year. And the Super Bowl was in Stanford Stadium. And I'm like, well, if the Bears win, I called my uncle, who was a 49er ticket holder. I go, how do I get 10 tickets? Because now I'm starting to freak. And he goes, you'll have no problem getting tickets, because if the 49ers don't get in, it's sort of a home game, right? There'll be tickets like crazy. No one wants to see the Bears play out here. And I'm like, cool.
Inside information.
Right. So that was the year that the Bears lost to the 49ers, where they said to the Bears players, next year, bring your offense, because they got crushed, right? But that was my lesson, and never, ever be short gamma, ever. In a real world experience of it.
That was an inexpensive lesson, because most of us learn by paying 5-figure dues.
Believe me, you know what? It would have cost me easy $200 a ticket anyway, right? So it would have cost me a couple grand, to make. It was a 20-to-1 shot that I was short.
Right.
And I'm like, I want to be on the other side of those equations, right?
Yeah, you don't sell 20 delta options short.
No.
You buy
right. I mean, so like that's, and Kessler was always pretty much long premium, and he was, I was very, very lucky to get in with him, because the guy was brilliant.
Yeah.
So he
Did
I
you
sort
spend
of
much
just
time
watched.
teaching upstairs? Like, I don't remember there being, big group classes on how to do things. I mean, we just kind of learned by assimilation. There really weren't any books to read for the most part, no movies to watch per se. I
Right,
remember at
but
first stop, Freddie O'Donnell had a small tape series that used a
yeah,
Betamax player that we could watch
right.
basic options, but that was it.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if you're an aspiring guy that wanted to learn how to do it without having to crack the math books and get into the math of it, right? The why and the wherefores is you always want to be long gamma, because when the gamma goes, it's that's the side to be on. So just by watching those guys, I was able to absorb that method, and I was never wanting to be shorted ever. So
What do you remember most about the bull markets from, say, 82, 84, August of 84 until, October of 87, before the crash? So let's just go pre-crash for now, and then we'll hit the crash and then
oh well,
post-crash.
I was short the whole way because puts were so alluring. Because when the puts went, it was like crazy, right? It's the fear and greed thing. The fear is like instantaneous, and the greed thing can play out over time, but the fear is like immediate, right? So I always like trading puts. So not that I was short the whole time, but I was never really long either. So I tried to stay flat and just scalp, and if anything, I was short though. So
Mhm.
the reality of it.
And when you went into the OEX pit, you were there on the old floor. Did you go into that pit then, or would you only come eventually to the OEX pit and the new floor, like an 85-ish or whatever year that was?
I forget. I think I traded it on the old floor for a bit, and then it moved.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's how it worked.
Right, right.
But I was trading in home stake too, because gold was going crazy at that
Gold's
time.
crazy, right? Gold was a few $100s an ounce back then. I think maybe
But they had $10 gaps in the stock and stuff, and it was like pandemonium.
Homestake
So
was one of the companies back then for sure.
right.
What other memories do you have about being on the old trading floor?
Um, Met my bride, right? So she shows up on the trading floor, and it's like, oh my God, that's the one. If ever I get a chance. So I shamelessly chase after her for 3 months, and it's like, well, I have to wash my hair, or I have to.
I have to do my nails. I have to take out the
Yeah,
garbage.
right. I mean, oh my God. I mean, I was shamelessly an idiot, right? And so I go over to Brokers one day, and she's sitting there on a date with the guy with the patch on his eye. Remember the clerk who had the patch on his eye, who worked for in the Teledyne pit? I think he worked for, forget who he worked for.
It sounds familiar, but I can't picture him.
It might have been Larry Dubin that he worked for. I'm not sure. I can't remember. I'm like, oh my God, I got beat out by the patch. I suck. I'm the worst. Right. So
And
I'm
then
like, all right, I'm done. So and then it was Valentine's Day of '79. She gave me a Valentine and a kiss, and I'm like, okay, it's on. And then from that day on, it was February of '79. So it's 43 years we've been hanging out together, right?
wow.
And we got married in '81, and 3 kids, 6 grandkids. Be fruitful and multiply. That stuff's in the Bible,
You learned that
right?
at Ignatius.
Yeah, right.
That's excellent. All right, so let's go now to the crash of 87, right? So interest rates were about 8%. They had been rising all spring,
Yeah.
all summer. Market was making new highs. It was, good times are here. But we had a little bit of a pullback in September, rallied, and then the crash ultimately came. I don't think anybody really predicted the crash per se, but
No,
we all learned a lot of valuable lessons that day. So what was it like for you going into that
it was the week
summer,
before,
summer
right?
of
Because
87 into that
right,
time period?
right. So that week before the Black Monday, right? The week before expiration was Friday,
Hmm.
right? So all the October stuff came off the board on that Friday.
I know.
Right. Right. So that week, that week was a gigantic and unprecedented move. And I made like, I'm trading my own account then. And it's like, I had the best week ever in my career that week on that Friday. And I had nothing on my sheets, zero. I was going to go on vacation. Right.
Hmm.
And then I forget what happened, but on that Monday morning, there were the shared raise accounts. Remember those?
Yeah.
Right. So
Raise,
I was in
Raise was a joint account that you had a bunch of traders in, and you were getting automatically assigned trades. Primarily, you
right,
were short premium. Raise
right.
was an acronym for Retail Automatic Execution
was it retail? I forget.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it was,
I'll have to look it up.
but it was like automatic 10 lots, right? And then people would have associations of market makers would join these groups, and then someone would manage that account. And I
Yeah.
was in Carrie Con. Remember Carrie Con?
I do remember Carrie Con.
All right, it was Carrie Con's account, and I joined it, and I'm like, great, whatever. You get a check for something every month, and it was like free money kind of, except for when the crash happened. I'm like, do we have exposure on this? Well, we have a little. I go, what's a little bit? I mean, a little bit's a lot of bit.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked out that they were short like a 3 lot or something, and we didn't get a check that month. Or, I mean, it all worked out. But I mean, I was flat, so I'm like, I was going to go on vacation, so we went up to Door County,
Mm-hmm.
and so I wasn't there for the. I went there for the Monday to make sure. Well, we used to have the Saturday trade checking.
Trade checking
right?
session, sure.
So on the Saturday trade checking of that crazy week before, I was flat. I had no out trades. Everything was good. So I figured I was great. But then Monday happened, and I had to chase down the Raise account and make sure that I had no exposure there. And I'm like, okay, we're supposed to go to Door County. Let's go. So I missed that Monday, but it was the week before that was absolutely nuts. I mean, I remember standing in the pit thinking, oh my God, the cheapest put on the board is like a $50. And it's going. And I remember just scooping a bunch of them out of the book and just letting them go.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked out.
Good.
But that's the thing. Being in the pit, you had a sort of an innate gauge of fear and greed, and you could see, so you could get a little bit of ahead of it if it, because we had developed sensitivities. That's the way I describe it.
Right. There was a certain intuition that you got in the pit. You could tell when there was panic and fear and
right.
something wasn't right.
Right.
So RAISE stands for the Retail Automatic Execution System. So it was a way for the public to be able to execute electronically as long as they paid the offer or sold the bid, which was perfect for us.
Right. And they could fill immediately, and the market makers didn't care. Go ahead, take our offer, or hit our bid, and we'll just manage it as we go. And it turned out to be a great thing, except for that one day.
Right. Right. And so, and by the way, in case I didn't thank you enough, letting Evie and I use your place in Door County after I had a mental breakdown from that 1987 through 89. I'm not sure what year we went there. I think it could have been after 87.
It was a great little place
in the wintertime, and there's nobody there. We had the place to ourselves. We had the whole town to ourselves.
Right.
And it was great. And I signed a little guest book, so I'm sure I'm still up there.
Sure. Right. Well, I mean, so I had planned to, so I'm like, okay, well, and I think Kessler, because I was clearing Kessler at the time, I think. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think so.
And I think he who was it that, like, he said, if you're not going to be here, I'm taking you off the seat and I'm going to give it to someone that's going to use it. I'm like, have at it. I don't care. You know what I mean? But when I come back, I want to be back on a seat. He goes, great. So I think I was on a board of trade seat at the time, and I forget who went on my seat, but some guy came in and I was like, fine.
Did you ever go to the board of trade in the summertime when things were slow at the CBOE and trade?
Oh yeah.
And soybeans and.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because
what was that like?
Friends of mine were in the bean pit, in the futures pit, and I said, I have an interest. If I can be a bean trader from 9:30 to 1:15, I would love that, right? And so he said, okay, well, come on over, and I'll let everyone know who you are, kind of thing, because it's a click, right? Mm-hmm. So I went and traded soybeans for a while. It was great.
It was great hours. I didn't make any money over there, but it was a lot of fun.
Well, it's hard to make money because, like, the biggest indicator you have is the guy panicking next to you. I guess it's going down, or I guess I don't have a clue because I wasn't trading. There's the crush spreads between the oil and the meal and the soybean futures, and I hadn't figured that out yet. I was just going to stand in the futures pit and fling them, and try to make some money. Maybe I made a little, or it wasn't enough. It wasn't compelling enough where I had it already set up to be able to do it at the CBOE because I had an understanding of options way more than I did of futures.
So you had mentioned in the very beginning of the interview that you were at St. Ignatius with your friend Darley. Now that's the same guy you drove a fire truck from Chicago to Las Vegas with the lights on tell us that story real quick, right? Is that the same Darley family, the Darley fire
Yeah.
truck
So,
family?
yeah, the Darley family is, their grandfather invented the fire industry's best fire pump.
Hmm.
And to this day, it's still number one. So what they did is they built a company around it to build pumper trucks utilizing these pumps, and they would sell these trucks around the world. So they had sold one to Guam, and Bill Darley, his dad, who had taken over the company, says to Peter, my buddy, he goes, "Hey, you and Cavanagh, take this truck, you drive it, you drive it to Oakland, and you put it on the ferry, or because it's going to Guam." And we're like, "Really? Okay, great." I mean, it's a lime green, full, ready to go. I mean, honestly,
Fire
ready to
truck.
go. Yeah, and we drove it like through Reno, because that's how 80 went through, right? And we stopped and we were gambling in Reno, and we're idiots, and we're like 20 years old. And we got to California, and my sister was living there then, and we're going down her street, and it was her birthday, and I'm singing "Happy Birthday" to her with the siren and the loudspeaker, and she's like, "What's going on?" It's just me,
Uh-huh. Oh my
And the
gosh.
next year we drove one to Riviera Beach in Florida and put it on a boat, and it went over to the Bahamas, and then we flew over to the Bahamas and put it into service for the Bahamian government. So we did it, 2 summers in a row. It was crazy.
Crazy times.
Yeah, that
So
was.
then, after the crash of '87, we had the mini crash of '89. You primarily stood down in the bottom of the pit near Lakeshore. You
Yeah,
were
yeah,
hung out with Matt Flipovich and
yeah, yeah.
Mike Gallagher and all those guys. I mean, it was a you. How did you get nestled in that spot? How did you find that spot? And you ended up staying there, I think, for almost all of your career, except when you went over to the SPX pit.
Um, well, Flip was a buddy of mine, like from way back. So like Flip worked for Pershing, and Pershing was the booth over from Lehman. It went Hutton, Lehman, Pershing. So I got to know Flip right away, and he's a beautiful guy. I love him. And he was the broker in there. I thought, yeah, I'll just go stand next to Flip. You know what I mean? It
Right.
can't hurt, right?
Hmm.
Because other guys had relationships with like Jimmy Boyle and who are the other guys over there? Danny Vevers, those, right? And I was steps away from them enough that I didn't really have a lot of access to them, but I did, but I didn't. But there was the book there, so I had the Lakeshore guys. I had sort of close to the Schwab guys, but I had the book I could always trade with. Plus, the rest of the pit you just shouted out, and I was comfortable down there. So
Do you remember what your biggest trade was?
yeah, it was the trade of '89. It was the crash of '89. The same thing happened where it's like the cheapest put is $50, and like, "Hey, Flip, you got anything?" "Yeah, I got them. I'll take them."
Hmm.
Right. So I think I bought 200 from Flip at 9/16 of a dollar. Right. And I mean, they went to $1 right away, and I sold 100 of them as fast as I could because I had 200 of them. And then they stopped trading at 2 o'clock, and I'm like, well, they've never stopped trading before. So, and I'm still long 100 of these things.
Right.
And we went upstairs, and it's like, Norm Anderson told me, "What do you got?" I'm like, I was just saying, I got 100 of these things. What do you think they're worth? He goes up, he did the math, and because he was so plugged into the matrix of everything. And he goes, these things are $18 right now. And I'm like, ah! And I let 100 of them go for $1. I make 17s. I'm like, I'm a hero, and I still have 100 of them, and now they're going to open up at $18. I'm up, 170 grand or something. That's
Wow.
craziness, right?
Mhm.
So in 1989, I'm 33 years old. I'm sitting on this 100 lot, and the next day we go in. They closed the trading on Friday, right?
Mhm.
And then on Monday they opened up, and like every heavyweight's in the crowd, right? Because Danny Asher was never in the OEX a lot, right? Kessler was never in the OEX a lot, right?
Only
Because
the
they
big
had
days.
right, because they had Jack Fahey and they had guys doing stuff for them, but all those guys were in the pit, and I'm like, what? Oh, and I'm watching the opening rotation,
Mhm.
and I'm like, what are these things? And they're like, 18 bid, $18 bid. I'm like, 18? I'm not selling a single one. They're going to 100 for sure, right? and guys are buying 500 lots, and I'm like, they're blowing people up left and right.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time rotation end, they're $12, and I'm like, ah! I sell the 100 out at 12, and I short them at 11. They went out. They went out worthless at the end of that week.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Crazy times.
It was absolutely bananas.
So how did you relax? How did you decompress other than music? Like what was your, I mean, I had a conversation today with Asher Bronfeld, who seemed to be very stoic, an accountant background.
Yeah.
Whether he had a good day or a bad day, his demeanor was the same. But you and I are emotional beings, and we would come home. We had a great day. We were ticked off, and our wives were like, "What's wrong? How was work?" I'm like, "I had made 8,000 today." Go, why are you so upset? Well, I could have made 3,000 more.
That's right. Right.
Or what happened today? I lost 5,000.
Right. Well, I mean, that was the effect of the '89 deal. I go, I should have made gigantic, and I only made, I'm like, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
How about that? You're a complete idiot. So, yeah. Just music was my thing mostly, So,
okay, this is going viral right now.
Yeah. It's lunchtime. What am I going to do?
All right, go ahead.
So the relaxation for me was music all the time, right? So, I mean, there was a point when I was deciding, even to go down to the trading, or, should I go to Berkeley and Boston and, learn it for real and do what, the real guys are doing musically.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that's not going to be so good with having a family. That's not going to be so good with any sort of stability. Or
right.
So I decided to go downtown instead. But I was heavily engaged in the music thing. I played chess a lot. That's another great story, is when Kasparov came to the floor.
I don't remember that. What year was that?
96, I think, 97. I got invited to play. He was doing this. It was Belzberg Technology, and Belzberg was trying to interface with the exchange to be, the head DPMs or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I got invited to play because, like an idiot, I'd always stand in the middle of the pit and goes, "Who wants to play chess for $100?" I'll take my queen off the board, and just being a complete idiot to try to intimidate people and be a knucklehead. But I guess they knew I played chess, so they invited me to play, and it was an exhibition, right? So there's 20 people. There's 5 people at each table in a square, right? The tables were set up in a square. He would stand in the middle with his manager, and he would say, he's going to move. He's going to be white. You're going to play black in every situation. Wait for him to come back to you before you make a move. Don't make the move when he comes back to your position.
Got it.
And he will go all the way around. So my wife's there. There's a couple of little kids sitting near me. There was, people from all stripes, right? There's chess moms hanging over their little kids and stuff. And my wife's sitting behind me, and she goes, "If you lose, right, you better not be the first one to lose." I go, "They're all going to lose, right? We're all going to lose." She goes, "If you're first, I don't want you to be that idiot."
I'm changing my name.
Yes. So, of course, it happens. 9th move, I lose. I turn my king over. She goes, "What happened?" I'm like, "I lost." And the little chess kid's sort of giggling at me, right? The kid's about 7 years old, and he's still in the game, right?
Right.
But I knew everyone's going to say, I went, 47 moves against Kasparov. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to play offense. I'm going to try to go after him, right? Well, 9 moves, and I was tapioca. But 2 guys later, there was a big scandal. Like, we had to sign waivers saying that we weren't right now above a 2,000 chess rating, right?
Okay.
And he, right after I lose, he gets to this guy and he goes, "I know who you are now." And the guy goes, "What?" He goes, "You didn't sign the waiver, did you?" And he goes, I was just the last minute invitee." And he goes, "Okay, but just let it be known. I have to know who I'm playing against here. And this is obviously, you're way over a 2,000 player.
Uh-huh.
And, and it's not fair. I have to know that I'm, who I'm playing against in these exhibitions." And he made a big stink about it. And the guy got up and left.
Mm.
And it was like, I found the guy later. He was a market maker on the floor. I'm not going to say what his name is. But he told me that he studied Kasparov's worst games ever and tried to play his worst game against him. Like for months he had studied it. So it
Wow.
was a setup, right?
Really?
But then no one knew that I was out because this scandal was happening. So it was like, nice job, buddy. Thanks. You took the heat off me.
A little deflection.
All right. So the next day I get a call from the exchange and they said he would like to come down to the floor. And I was like one of the only floor traders that they had invited, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Can you bring him into the pit? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Bring him down. So he gets down to the floor behind the SPX. And there's this giant entourage and people are like, what's going on? Who's this? And, they motion to me, I'm like, sure. I walk out, I grab him, I bring him. That's before they had the entryway right on the side by the escalator. You had to go up to the top of the pit and come in.
Okay.
So I grabbed him and I go, come on, let's go. We'll go down into my spot. And I'm like, spread out, champion coming through, right? And everyone parted the ways. We got down into my spot. He goes, oh my God. He goes, it's so crazy here. I stand here, I would lose my chest. I go, why do you think you beat me in 9 moves? But that was a real good one. Yeah, that was a real good one.
Did anybody take pictures of that? Do you have that?
Oh, yeah. We got pictures of it someplace. I don't know where they are.
And so then how did you transition in the 90s when things became more electronic? I mean, I think most of the independent traders had really struggled with fighting against, the Timber Hill, Susquehanna, CRT, Citadel. It was just red was narrowed, all that stuff. How did you?
Okay, so the way it worked for me, I lost my money 3 different times in my career. Just went 0 or below, and you got to rebuild. But there's 2 ways of blowing out down there. You blow out for millions, and then you got the plague, and no one will touch you, right? Or you blow out for just enough that you got to pay it back. So that was me 3 different times, right?
Uh-huh.
And the third and last time was 95, and interest rates were going way down. So volatility was going way down, and I like to be long volatility. I didn't like to be short it. Mm-hmm. And so that worked against me. And I would borrow money to stay alive and pay the seat lease. And, because I'm absolutely as hard-headed as anyone you'll ever meet in your whole life. I'm going to go out on my own terms kind of guy, right?
Stubborn Irishman, but go ahead.
Right. I'm not going out like this. Well, it turns out that Kessler was floating me, and then it's like, I'm debit, right? And I owe him a bunch of dough. And he's like, what are you going to do? Right. I'm like, and he hadn't been giving me any heat, right? He would just float me. He didn't care anymore. And I said, well, I heard you're starting a group. And he goes, I am. I'm like, I'm your guy in the SPX. And he goes, perfect. So I started with him in 95. Mm-hmm. And then he started Arbitrade in probably 97. I was representing him for a couple of years, and then Arbitrade started, and then he sold that to Night Trading, and then they sold it to Citigroup. So it's like I was in that group. I was the first guy. It was me and then Effie Gildor came in after that.
I remember him, Effie, sure.
Right. It was me and Tiger and Mark Lyons.
Uh-huh.
It was Mark Lyons, and it was me and Kessler and Mark Lyons, and then Effie Gildor came in, and he came in with the handheld technology, and that's what, so then we became that, we became the first group with handhelds, I guess.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
So having a handheld in 1995 was really hot technology at the time to be able to have a small
people were blowing
tablet.
The other market makers, what are you doing with what's with the lunchbox? And I'm like, hey guy, make a market. Mm-hmm. And they'd say something, I go, sold. And then, they couldn't compete. Right. So that was a precursor to the inevitable, right? So then the other firms started getting on it right away. So, but we had that advantage for probably 3 or 4 years. It was crazy.
It was a huge advantage to be able to do arbitrage between the SPX pit at the CBOE, the OEX pit, and then the big product down at the Mercantile.
Yeah, we were right. So we would, wherever the orders were initiated, we try to stay delta neutral and just try to capture as much as we can on each exchange. So like I would take down some gamma, and then they would lay it off in the OEX, or they would, lay it off with futures, and it was instantaneous, right? And then that evolved into doing the auto quote in the SPX. There were we were one of the first firms to do that because we had the technology to make these theoreticals absolute and no one could argue it, right?
So auto quote was, refresh my memory. That was when you guys were sending quotes from either your handheld or from upstairs to the exchange, and you were
Right,
quote. So it was you guys arbitrate or
right. Night trading or
night
whoever it was at
trading.
that point.
It was
Where,
one firm
yeah,
responsible for sending all the quotes to the screen and
well,
then disseminated nationwide.
right. That's how it started. One firm would be, and then, 2 months later, Blair Hall said, we'll do it. Okay, fine. So then it became a rotating thing where one firm would do it, and then it became the group of firms, and then everyone started working together that way, right?
Did you enjoy that as much as you enjoy being an independent market maker? Because most market makers I know didn't blow out for big; they blew out through attrition because it was
Right,
expenses and seat lease and
sure, right,
commission, and you just see your account go down every single day
right,
for months, and it's
right.
emotionally
It was
exhausting,
horrible. Yeah, it
horrible.
was horrible. But I knew that that that's part of the rite of passage, and that's part of the heat that's going to make you the hardest metal. That you have to negotiate that. You got to
Right.
get through those. If you're going to be here forever, or you're going to call the tune about how you're going to leave, then you have to go through everything that comes at you,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, okay, I'm up shit's creek, kind of. Kessler, I owe him some dough.
Hmm.
And he asked me flat out, "You're debit, you can't trade. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to work for you."
Right.
You are. So I mean, I always I always try to think about what's next. What can I do? And even when it's the darkest of dark, that was one of the biggest opportunities I ever had down there, was
Sure.
working for him, because I went from 95 to 2016 working in that operation.
I was just going to say you had incredible longevity being there. You were a very active market
Yeah,
maker and a very valuable player until
yeah,
2016, 2017
right,
when you left.
right. And then, like, the trading floor went from 4,500 people at its apex probably to like 300 people when I left. So, I mean, it was more than on the wall. The writing was way more than on the wall. It was like stark,
Hmm.
right? And it's like, when the clerks start getting laid off and the people that have worked for the exchange forever and ever, like Lou Lynette, remember Lou, Sweet Lou, and she started a catering business. She was one of the post supervisors in the SPX. Little blonde chick, beautiful person. I love her.
Uh-huh.
But when she got let go, I'm like, oh boy, that ain't
Yeah.
good. But the electronic trading had already taken over everything at the Board of Trade. It's that they hadn't figured out how to uh, make options market making electronic, because the end user actually wanted to negotiate the price of these,
Right.
all these different options together. And I don't want to sell it on the bid. I want to negotiate the price, and that left the open outcry in the SPX, alive for a long, long
How
time.
many people do you think are in the SPX pet now?
Oh, I don't know, 20.
Wow.
I mean, I don't even know.
Mhm. I had a conversation with Billy Halloran about 3 weeks ago. I bumped into him. His acronym was WVH. He started with
Yeah,
his brother Terry, and
sure.
um, I can't remember. It began with a W. I can't remember the name of the stock appointment that he was in. Very popular, active broker. He's like one of the last guys left.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
literally,
Well,
like he's gonna be the guy turning off the switch at the
yeah,
CBOE.
I thought that would have been me, but it didn't turn out that way. So it, it's okay.
Right.
You
It
know,
was a good run.
I had 41 years, Billy. It's crazy. I mean, I didn't even know. I had no
Warner
clue when I went down.
Communications. I'm sorry. Warner Communications is
Yeah,
WCI.
yeah,
He was
right,
like,
right. All right. So I went down there at 19 and I left at 60. I mean, I was 19 years old when I showed up, and I left when I was 60 years old. That's nuts,
right.
right? That is
And so,
wow.
what are you doing today? What occupies your time?
Um, well, I've been mentoring guys who are having to transition from being floor traders to now trying to uh, understand what it is, because it's not just the X's and O's, right? It's a psychological hammer.
Uh-huh.
It's the months of attrition that you were talking about. That's the psychological hammer that no one ever thinks about until you're actually in the flame of battle, and you're like, oh my God, I just missed it by a tick and it went my way huge. Oh my God, or I suck, or you know what I mean? Or I got squeezed out and then it went my way. I mean, those are, excuse me, those are crazy things to have to go through, and you have to you have to be aware of it. If you're not aware of it, it'll pound you. It'll pound you mercilessly.
You're
Um,
you're you're mentoring now?
yeah,
That's what you do? Really? Wow, that's
yeah,
really exciting. I didn't know that.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's just a couple people, but
Huh?
they're starting to do well. So it's,
That's really excellent.
yeah. And then I started doing the music thing um, in probably 2013, 2014 is when I started playing again a lot.
Hmm.
And one of the guys I played with, I thought was, you know, I'd heard his compositional catalog, and I'm like, we have to do this with the best players on earth.
Hmm.
And we did. And that started, I got to go to Europe a couple times with that band. And
Lovely bride back there.
yeah, yeah. Got to go to Europe a couple times with that band. And we were actually supposed to be in Kiev, Ukraine in March of 2020. Like
Whoa.
we had a contract for a jazz fest in Kiev, Ukraine. And then COVID hit and we had to cancel. So they said, oh, we'll just reschedule for September. And I'm like, perfect. It'll be done by then, right?
Hmm.
So that never happened.
Wow. That's
So,
pretty amazing.
so from doing that, from originally doing it, I've attracted other people that want me to help produce them. And so I'm like, perfect. So yesterday morning, actually, we did the finishing touches on this next album that I did for an artist named Ruslan Sirota, who won a Grammy playing with Stanley Clarke in, I think, 2011.
Hmm.
And he's a fantastic composer. But yesterday morning, we did the orchestra, the recording of the orchestra of the material that's going to be on his album. And it's an orchestra in Budapest, Hungary, that I guess they do half of Hollywood's soundtracks because the dollar goes way, way
Right.
more
They're outsourcing
in Budapest
musicians.
than it does in LA,
Mhm.
right? So they outsource it, and he got hip to at least call these guys and see. So they're all set up for these sessions. They go, all our guys will be here. Send us your material, and he sent them the material 2 weeks ago. So the orchestra was ready. He goes, okay, you have an hour and 20 minutes. And so yesterday morning, which is 4:30 their time, right? I'm on a Zoom watching this stuff because I'm the executive producer. And it's
Wow.
like, oh my God, that's where I resonate, Billy.
Right, right.
That's where I resonate.
And so about 2 years ago, year and a half, 2 years ago, you and I had a conversations about non-fungible tokens.
Yeah, yeah,
How do artists begin to monetize their work because they're horribly paid?
yeah,
They
right,
just can't, Apple sells a song for 99 cents and they keep 90 cents of it, right?
right,
So
right.
have you gone in the NFT direction
Um,
at all, or has your son Stephen Jr. was a
yeah, yeah,
artist, painter? I think was
yeah.
he?
Well, that's one of his paintings right there. So the thing is about the NFT landscape is that we're still at the tailgating party. The game hasn't even started yet,
Okay.
right? We're throwing back a couple of beers and eating chips, waiting for the game to start because no one has it figured out yet. But what it's going to be, in my mind, is that it's a way for the artists to finally capture their creativity without a big record company saying you owe us these certain amount of albums over this amount of time. We own all the publishing, blah 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 blah, and it's
Right.
just been a complete ripoff, ever since recorded music started. And then when they made recorded music free, it laid waste to that whole industry.
Sure.
So now you see all these hedge funds and big houses buying all the legacy books from Bob Dylan and Stevie
Ah,
Nicks.
because they're going to convert them to NFTs and maybe
Right.
monetize it.
Well, at some point, I'm not sure what they're thinking. There's going to be a winner and a loser in that, but everyone's selling their books. Like Sting sold his and Springsteen sold his. They're all selling them, right?
Right. Interesting.
But who's taking care of the guys today, right? Who's taking care of the composers that are absolutely killing it today, and they don't have the advocates behind them because everyone's too busy scrambling for where the next dollar is going to be, right? So in my mind, I want to be associated with some absolutely killer composers of today and see if we can develop, and that's part of the deal.
Awesome. Good for you.
I get publishing rights and I can advocate for them, and maybe I can build a book that's worth something someday. You know what I
Beautiful.
mean?
So let's just close and wrap it up with any other stories, inspirations, anything from the trading floor that you want to talk about? Anything?
I mean, we could get negative, but I don't want to. I'm the 4 or 5 fights I got into in the pits, but that's just part of the deal too. I'm mostly really good friends with most of the people I've had down there. So.
Do you stay in touch with Freddie Lawrence? I think was he one of the first guys that brought you on the floor, or you worked with?
No. Freddie, he was friends with Gino Alexander, and so we started playing music early together, right? And actually, Kessler was a clerk for Freddie Lawrence before Kessler was 21. As soon as he turned 21, he's like, "See ya, Freddie." But that's how that happened. Kessler worked for Freddie. But one of the stories is we were playing music in my parents' house in the basement. We had a little studio set up, and my dad came down and he goes, "Hey guys, I hate to tell you, but John Lennon was just assassinated." So that was, way back in 1980, we were doing that stuff, right? I mean, Freddie says it was like, that's one of the moments in his life that will always be indelible, right? When my dad came down and told us that John Lennon had just been killed.
What about 9/11? What was it like being in the trading pit like 10 minutes or 12 minutes after 8, right before the bell opened?
We were up in our offices, and the first one had hit. And we're all sitting around going, "Well, was it a prop plane? What was this a mistake?" And then boom, the second one, and I'm like, "Okay, boys, this is jihad."
Game on, right? Yeah, jihad, right?
Yeah, this is jihad. And my kids, my son was a senior at Ignatius, and my daughter was a freshman at Ignatius. So I said, "I'm going to go over there and collect my kids, and I'm going home. See ya."
Yeah.
And they come to the exchange, So.
Yeah, we took everybody off the floor, brought them back upstairs, just safety, go home.
Right.
I was able to get a ride home from John Massarelli, and he had like a Mustang convertible. We did like 100 miles an hour out of the city, out of the loop, to where we lived, because we didn't know if the Sears Towers was next or
we
whatever.
didn't know. Yeah, we didn't know.
Yeah,
but I remember going to Ignatius and collecting my kids and, taking them home and saying, "All right, the exchange is closed for 5 days." We didn't even know how long it was going to be closed for, but yeah, it was stark. I mean, there was the Challenger blowing up because I was on the trading floor that day. There was a bunch of crazy stuff.
For sure.
Absolutely. Well, in 40 years, you're going to see a lot of crazy stuff, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, listen, man, honestly, I could talk to you for another hour. This was really great. I really enjoyed, again, I haven't seen you in so long face to face. This is the closest thing.
Well, guess what? I'm coming up to Glenview. We're getting a coffee.
Done. Right. I would love that. Mark, thank you so much. Anything you want to shamelessly self-promote? You want people to get in touch with you if they need music production or
just mentoring? Everyone take a look at, we had an album release in January 28th from Rope-A-Dope Records. It was called Chicago Experiment. And Daryl Jones from the Rolling Stones and Miles Davis Group was on that record, and Micaiah McCraven, who's getting a lot of international acclaim. And it's all these Chicago guys. And it's a series that started in Philadelphia in 1991 with Questlove and Pat Martino. And they did the Philadelphia experiment, then they did the Detroit, then they did the Harlem experiment in 2007. And none of them have been done until we just released this one in 2022. And it's the Chicago experiment. It's really good. And then Russell and Sirota's album's coming out, and I'm putting another band together, and we're gonna start touring stuff. And it's
awesome.
Check out Chicago Experiment. It's crazy.
Will do. All right, man. Love you, brother. Thank you so much for sharing this time with me.
Thanks for doing this, Billy. Honest to God, it's the greatest.
It's really great to catch up with you, and I'll see you on Facebook.
All right, brother. Thanks.
All right, ciao.
Later.